movies, right? Daring covert operations, car chases, the whole deal. But what's the real story behind Israel's legendary intelligence agency? Well, today, we're going to peel back that Hollywood fiction and really dig into the complex and often brutal history of Mossad, from its biggest wins to its most controversial failures.
Yeah, those stories on screen are a ton of fun, but the reality, it's way more complicated and honestly a lot more interesting. We're going to look at three key operations that really define Mossad's legacy: a mission for historical justice, an incredible Cold War intelligence coup, and a brutal campaign of revenge. See, this isn't just a story about spies. It's about a nation's struggle for survival and the incredibly difficult choices it made along the way.
Okay, so before we get into the wild stories, what is Mossad exactly? Well, the name in Hebrew just means the Institute, and it was founded way back in December 1949. Its main jobs are collecting intelligence, counter-terrorism, and running covert operations outside of Israel. And here's the key part: it answers directly to the Prime Minister. If you're looking for an easy comparison, you can think of it as Israel's version of the American CIA or Britain's MI6. So, to really wrap our heads around what Mossad is all about, we're going to zero in on three huge moments in their history. We'll start with the famous hunt for the Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann. Then, we'll get into the absolutely daring theft of a Soviet jet. And finally, we'll take a deep dive into the dark and complex story of Operation Wrath of God, including the terrible price of that vengeance and the controversial legacy it left behind. Each of these stories shows us a totally different side of the organization.
All right, let's kick things off with what is, without a doubt, Mossad's most celebrated operation. And this one wasn't about military strategy or anything like that. No, this was about justice. It was about confronting the past and sending a powerful message for the millions of victims of the Holocaust.
You know, this timeline really simplifies what was a truly incredible story. Adolf Eichmann, this was the guy who organized the logistics of the Holocaust. After the war, he just vanished. He escaped to Argentina and was living a quiet life under a fake name. For years, he was a ghost. The big break came from a German prosecutor who, get this, was afraid his own government wouldn't act, so he tipped off Mossad. So a team flies to Buenos Aires, literally snatches Eichmann off the street, and smuggles him out of the country on a commercial flight, drugged up and disguised as a crew member. I mean, it was a flagrant violation of Argentina's sovereignty, but for Israel, the moral need to do this was just absolute. And this quote, it just perfectly captures why they took that insane risk. The trial in Jerusalem was a massive watershed moment. Unlike the Nuremberg trials after the war, this was being run by the Jewish state, and its most powerful evidence came from the testimony of Holocaust survivors. For the very first time on a global stage, they got to tell their stories. This forced a new generation of Israelis to really confront the human reality of it all. Eichmann, first part, claimed he was just a bureaucrat, the famous banality of evil argument. But the court found him guilty, and to this day he is the only person ever to be judicially executed by the state of Israel.
Okay, so now we're going to shift gears, big time. We're moving away from a mission of historical justice and into an operation of pure, hard-nosed strategic espionage. This next story had a huge impact on the military balance of power in the Middle East right at the height of the Cold War.
This whole operation was just a masterclass in psychology and honestly a lot of patience. This was not a simple smash-and-grab job. As you can see, Mossad's first attempts were total disasters, but they learned from their mistakes and found the perfect target in an Iraqi pilot named Munir Redfa. He was one of Iraq's best pilots, but as a Christian, he felt discriminated against and sidelined. So Mossad made contact, offering him a new life. But he had one non-negotiable demand: his entire family had to be safe. So at the same time, Mossad was running a whole second, incredibly complex operation to smuggle all his loved ones out of Iraq. Only when he got the signal that they were safe did he get in that cockpit and make his flight. So getting their hands on this plane, this was the ultimate intelligence jackpot. The MiG-21 was the Soviet Union's top-of-the-line fighter jet. It was the plane being flown by all of Israel's adversaries: Egypt, Syria, Iraq. Before this, Israeli pilots and their French Mirage fighters knew almost nothing about its actual performance. They nicknamed the jet they captured 007, and their test pilots immediately started flying it, discovering its strengths and, more importantly, its weaknesses. And that knowledge? It proved to be a total game changer. Just 1 year later, in the 1967 Six-Day War, the Israeli Air Force absolutely dominated the skies, and a big part of that was because they knew their enemy's best aircraft inside and out.
Okay, for our last story, we're heading into some really dark, really morally ambiguous territory. This is an operation that wasn't born from justice or military strategy. No, this one came from raw, unfiltered vengeance, right after an act of terrorism that horrified the entire world.
The 1972 Munich Olympics. They were supposed to be the Happy Games, a celebration of peace. But that dream was completely shattered when Palestinian terrorists from a group called Black September stormed the Olympic Village and took Israeli athletes hostage. After a horribly botched rescue attempt by German police, all 11 of the Israelis were dead. The world was just watching in horror, and Israel was enraged. Prime Minister Golda Meir made a secret decision. Israel would hunt down and kill every single person they believed was connected to the massacre. And that was the beginning of Operation Wrath of God.
So what followed was this brutal campaign of targeted killings that stretched across Europe for years, and this slide just shows you a handful of them. The methods were varied, they were creative, and they were ruthless. Wales Wider in Rome was shot 11 times. Think about that, 1 bullet for each murdered athlete. Mahmoud Hamshari in Paris was killed by a bomb they planted in his telephone. An agent called to confirm it was him, and as he answered, another agent detonated the device. This was a secret war, fought in the streets and hotel rooms all across Europe.
So, you've got to be wondering, right? How did they find all these guys scattered across Europe? Well, this is where the story gets absolutely wild. They had help, but their helpers had no idea they were helping. Declassified archives have revealed this secret intelligence sharing group called the Club de Bern. It was made up of agencies from all over Western Europe and Israel. So after an assassination, the local police would investigate, and their intelligence agencies would share what they found with the entire group, including Mossad. So in effect, the murderers were getting confidential police updates on their own murders. It's just incredible.
But you can't fight a secret war like this, in the shadows, across foreign countries, without things going wrong. This campaign of vengeance wasn't clean, it wasn't surgical, it came with a terrible price, and it led to a catastrophic mistake that would blow the whole operation wide open.
1. Just 1. That's the number we need to remember, because it represents the one innocent man whose death became the symbol for everything that could and did go wrong with Operation Wrath of God. His name was Ahmed Bouchiki.
Look, there's no other way to put it. The Lillehammer affair was a total, unmitigated disaster for Mossad. Their number one target was a man named Ali Hassan Salameh, the mastermind of the Munich attack. They got a tip he was in this tiny Norwegian town called Lillehammer. Based on a single faulty photograph, they misidentified Ahmed Bouchiki, a local waiter. They shot him dead as he was walking home with his pregnant wife. It was just a catastrophic intelligence failure. And to make it all worse, several of the Mossad agents were arrested by Norwegian police. Their trial laid the entire secret assassination campaign bare for the whole world to see, and it compromised Mossad's networks all across Europe. So, after looking at these 3 completely different operations, one of justice, one of brilliant espionage, and one of brutal vengeance, what's the big picture here? How do we even begin to assess the legacy of an organization like Mossad?
You know, the thing is, you just can't slap a simple label on Mossad. Its history isn't a movie with clear-cut heroes and villains. The Eichmann operation is widely seen as this righteous act of justice. Operation Diamond was a brilliant intelligence feat, but Operation Wrath of God, and especially the Lillehammer affair, that showed a much darker side. An organization willing to carry out extrajudicial killings on foreign soil and sometimes make devastating mistakes. The story of Mossad is really the story of a nation that believes it has to take extraordinary measures to protect itself.
And really, it all boils down to this one fundamental question, doesn't it? It's a question that every nation with a powerful intelligence service has to wrestle with. Where do you draw the line? When does protecting your own citizens justify breaking another country's laws or even taking a human life without a trial? There are no easy answers. And that complexity is what makes this history so challenging, so compelling, and so important for us to try and understand.